Okay, so what if you had a roadmap for the afterlife? And I don't mean some vague spiritual guide. I mean a detailed step-by-step manual. But here's the twist. What if that map wasn't really about what happens when you die, but was actually the key to living a more meaningful life right now? Today, we are going to try to reverse engineer life itself, using this really fascinating and kind of provocative blueprint of what comes next. Let's dive in.
This is really the heart of the matter, the core question that our source material puts right on the table. And look, this isn't just some late-night philosophical question. It's a very practical challenge. If you knew with absolute certainty what your final destination was, would you, pack a different bag for the trip? This is exactly what it means to reverse engineer your life.
Now, this idea, it completely flies in the face of what a lot of us are taught today, right? The common materialist view says our consciousness is kind of like software running on the hardware of our brain, and when that hardware shuts down, well, the software is gone. Poof! But the source we're looking at just throws that whole idea right out the window. It doesn't just suggest there's an afterlife, it states it as a fact.
And this is where it all begins. The entire framework that we're about to walk through is built on this one single, unshakable idea, what the source itself calls its 100% guarantee. This is the claim, right here. It's not presented as a belief or a hope, but as a truth. The language is so direct, it's almost like a warranty on a product you just bought. It is a very, very bold place to start, for sure.
So you have to ask, why start with something so absolute? Well, the source argues it's a necessary response to our modern materialist world. It's not trying to win a scientific debate here. Instead, it's all about establishing a fundamental spiritual truth. Because the logic is simple, right? If you don't actually believe in the destination, you're never going to bother planning the route.
So with that guarantee locked in, the source lays out this surprisingly detailed map of what happens next. So let's do it. Let's follow the soul on its very first steps after physical life ends.
So according to this map, the whole process is immediate. There's no celestial waiting room, no standing in a long line for judgment. The moment life ends, a sorting process kicks in, and the soul is immediately sent down one of two main paths.
And here are the two options on the table. Path number one is a direct route to a place the source calls hell, but, and this is important, it's for a very specific group. Path 2, which is where the vast majority of people go, leads to a place called the intermediate zone. So who gets this one-way ticket straight to hell? Well, get this. According to the source, it's not just about being a bad person. The most severe judgment is actually reserved for those who had a platform, thinkers, artists, leaders, and use that influence to steer society away from spiritual truth. It's a pretty wild idea that your public influence could matter even more than your private mistakes.
Okay, so most souls, as we said, end up in this intermediate zone. And this is where the map gets really, really interesting, because this place is apparently defined by a deep, profound sense of confusion.
I mean, just imagine it. You arrive in a new place with absolutely no memory of how you got there. That's the state of souls in this intermediate zone. They are basically trapped in this disorienting loop, completely unable to process that their earthly life is actually over. And this state of confusion? It's not just for a few minutes. The source claims that souls can stay lost in this zone for up to 70 years. I mean, that is an entire lifetime spent in a kind of spiritual limbo.
So why so long? The source explains it's basically a psychological block. Their attachment to their earthly life, all their memories, their sense of common sense, all of it just prevents them from accepting their new reality. They're essentially prisoners of their own disbelief.
But the intermediate zone isn't just a big, confusing waiting room. It's also an orientation center. The source describes these workers. You can think of them as spiritual guides or even volunteers, whose entire job is to help these lost souls understand what's happened to them and eventually guide them to the next stage of their journey.
Now let's circle back to hell. The source has a really, really different take on it. It's not a place of eternal punishment. It's a place of learning.
So think of it less like a prison and more like a spiritual boot camp. The goal isn't to punish, it's to correct. It's a place where souls are meant to confront their own flaws head-on and work to, as the source says, polish the soul.
And here's the crazy part. Here's how it works. This training isn't something that's done to you by some outside force. It is a direct reflection of who you were on Earth. So, if you were a liar, you suddenly find yourself in a world filled with liars. Your afterlife literally becomes a mirror, forcing you to finally see yourself clearly.
So, what is the point of all this? The sorting, the lost souls, these spiritual training grounds, what's it all for? Well, it all comes down to one big idea: giving us a compass for how to live our lives, right here, right now.
This is the key takeaway. This whole map isn't about getting us to dwell on death. No, it's about using the final destination to help us navigate the journey we're on today. Knowing where you're ultimately going totally changes how you decide to get there.
So how does this compass actually work in real life? Well, by giving you a clear final goal, it suddenly gives profound meaning to all the small, everyday choices we make. A simple act of kindness isn't just a nice thing to do anymore. It's a deliberate step on the path toward a better destination. It connects our daily lives to a much, much bigger story.
But this map, it's not just about you. The final, and honestly the most mind-bending idea in this whole thing, is that your understanding of the afterlife can actually help those who have already passed on.
We all tend to think of death as the final wall, the ultimate separation. But what if it's not? What if the living and the dead are still connected in some way?
This is a pretty radical idea, right? The source suggests that by simply understanding this map of the afterlife, you can act as a kind of lifeline for your ancestors who might be stuck and confused in that intermediate zone. Your knowledge can literally be the light that helps them find their way out.
And that's where we're going to leave it. We've gone through this incredible map, from its 100% guarantee all the way to its use as a moral compass. But this last idea, that we could be a guide for those who came before us, that takes it to a whole other level. It suggests our lives aren't just our own, but that we're part of a much larger story that spans generations, both past and future. It's a really powerful thought to end on.